reading? I didn't know you could read.
Reading. Not a lot of people do it, and I think it's a bit sad. But for the people who do, like you and me, we like to read for a particular reason or maybe a particular book back in the day that sparked our love for reading. You came across a book that rose the hairs on the back of your neck, and it's at that moment you knew you love to read, which is still probably why you still do today. Now, when it comes to the fantasy genre, some books that you might typically see is Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or Wheel of Time, or heck, even Twilight or The Fourth Wing. It really depends on where you are in terms of what book you pick up and what's the book that really sparks that love for reading. Now, for me, it wasn't any of these books. No, it wasn't Lord of the Rings, it wasn't Wheel of Time, and no, it wasn't Game of Thrones. So what were my 5 books? Well, today I'm going to go over the 5 books that got me into reading still to this very day in the fantasy genre. Starting right now with book number 1 being the Black Prism in the Lightbringer series by Brent. Now, I have no idea why I picked this book up a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I actually listened to an Audible because at the time I was not reading any physical books, in my hand. I was just listening to books. And this was the one that really got me straight away in terms of fantasy. And the thing that really just pulled me in probably the most or the quickest was the magic system that deals with colors and how the colors are used and how they transform into a substance known as Luxin. Each color having like a different property on how you can actually use it. I just thought that was so intriguing, using a bunch of different colors for different purposes, for violence or for actually like crafting things. It was really, really cool. And our main character too is such an underdog. Even his name being Kip, it doesn't really spark any intimidation. It doesn't really give you like a really hard name that this guy is gonna, hurt you in the future. He's just an underdog that you really want to care for and see succeed. I also like how Brent makes the main characters, or the characters in this series, really fight for their success. Versus some people, in some books, you just have some characters that are just given powers and right away they start smashing the enemies into pieces. Well, for Kip, he has to work at it, and he does not succeed at every turn. He actually fails a lot, and I liked seeing that. That was refreshing to see that in a book, and this is just something that has pulled me in straight away when I was listening to it, that I just listened to the rest of the series right after finishing this one because I needed to see what was going to happen next. Also, the world building is top notch in this series because it's very expansive. You go into this huge city, you have scenes where you're in these villages as well, and you have these crazy people just tearing these villages down to the ground, and you follow characters from multiple angles. And I enjoyed it all. Also, book number 2 has a whole academy setting that I just freaking love even more, pushing my love for the series even greater in book number 2. And overall, I enjoyed the series, and I recommend it to anybody. But for me, this was an instant win in my mind for reading fantasy, and I was so excited to see what was going to happen next. And I was actually really sad when the book series concluded. But you know what? With the fantasy genre, we have a lot of books to pick through, and that's why my book number 2 is also a very heavy hitter, to me at least, with that being The Shadow of What Was Lost in the Lycanius trilogy by James Islington. Now, I actually see a lot of people comparing this to The Wheel of Time, but I came into this, again, without reading The Wheel of Time, so I had no idea what that comparison really meant. But I can tell you that I freaking adore this book. I love the characters, I love the magic system, and I love the lore, the history of this world. I also think the character names are just super cool. I mean, you have Arkine Devade, you have Talcamar, you have Davian. I keep saying this other one in my mind all the time for whatever reason, Ashalia Chadris.
Ashalia Chadris.
Why do I keep saying that name? I don't know, it just rolls off the tongue super easy. Hopefully I'm saying it right. Maybe not. But I freaking adore this book. In this one, we really have 3 main characters, and I really enjoy 2 of them. And I enjoyed the third one too, just not as much as the first 2, with our main character being Davian. I really like the magic system in this series as well, because it goes really deep just beyond, just throwing magic cards out there. And there's a history to it, and there's a dark history to it as well, because we have this section of people, this, I guess you can call them tainted people, that have like these black vein-like features on their face that distinguish them from society, and they're shunned. And It's not nice. But the reason for it, which is explained in the series, is just jaw-dropping. And that's another thing. Jaw-dropping moments are just spread throughout the series at so many different moments that I just freaking love this series. All the characters are great. The history is fantastic. Lore and world building is top-notch. And what's crazy is that this was his debut fantasy book, and I am so happy that I got into it. This is another series, again, that I just consumed after reading this first one. Or should I say listening, because back in the day, I was listening to books, not reading them like I am now. So if you have not picked up The Shadow of What Was Lost just yet, or read any Lycania series, I recommend that you do, because it definitely rose the hairs on the back of my neck. Alright, book number 3, I read for a particular reason, or I listened to for a particular reason, because it's one of my favorite movies of all time, with that being Blade Runner. So when I found out that Blade Runner was adapted from a book, I had to pick it up. With that being Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I've already talked about this book a couple times so far on the channel, but I'll say it again. This is just a work of art. There's just so much packed into this tiny little book that just build the depressive world of Blade Runner. Themes like existentialism that just make you question, what does it mean to be human? I love books that do that, and this is definitely a book that does that, because we have robots, we have androids, we have people who are always adjusting their emotions and just trying to see reality for what it is, but people are always trying to escape it as well. And for you who have not read it just yet or watched the movie, we basically follow our main character being Rick Deckard, who is a Blade Runner, or a person on the hunt for illegal droids that escape to the planet Earth and try to live their lives. But it's his job to extinguish them, or expire them. What was the word? Sorry, the word was retire them. But you get my drift, right? He was supposed to kill them. In this story, he's faced with a lot of dilemmas in terms of, what is real? And he even questions himself sometimes, am I a person? Am I a human? And this is the book that made me realize that not all movie adaptations actually pull everything from the source material, being the book. But there is a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments to what is actually shown on the screen. Which, sometimes what is written in text is not best for the screen, and I understand that, but reading this just gave me more context into the world that just helped solidify my love for reading, especially in the cyberpunk, existentialism type of genre. So if you want to go question what it means to be human, I recommend you go check this one out, and I freaking loved it. The next one you've probably seen on a lot of fantasy lists because it's a name that's huge in the fantasy genre, with that being The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Again, this is back when I was not reading physical books at the time. I was only listening to books on Audible, and when I saw the estimated hour count, or the hour count of this book, being like 55 hours plus, it was a little bit daunting. Or I think any book that is 1,000 pages plus is going to be a little bit intimidating. In my case, it was, but the reviews were just glowing for it, so I had to check it out, and I'm so glad that I did, because now I'm 4 books deep, in love with the series even more. So I also loved how the magic system in the series was just so different compared to the Lycanius trilogy or even the Lightbringer series. But again, the thing that really swept me away was the characters in the story, in terms of the relationships that they built and just the overall connection that you make very quickly when starting this book. Characters like Kaladin, Dalinar, Adolin are those characters you cannot get enough of, and I freaking love their perspectives in the story that really just made this world feel real. Roshar, it felt like you were there. It felt like the world was trembling beneath your feet whenever the characters were going through the motion on whatever was happening at that given moment. Again, there's characters in here that you love, characters that you hate, and that just shows great craftsmanship from the author, Brandon Sanderson, being able to create these characters that you really connect to so strongly, while at the same time hating other characters and wanting to see them, perish. But, you know what? You're in for the ride, and I'm so happy that I did. It's also a pretty good bang for your buck in terms of buying this audiobook once, because you buy it once, you have 56 hours worth of content. That's pretty good, right? So you must likely have already read The Way of King. If not, go do that. It'll be worth your time, trust me. Alright, the last book on this list is one that I actually read physically, and it's at the time when I started, collecting books. As you can see behind me, I have a lot more books now, and this is really the start of that journey there in terms of reading books, in my hand. With that being To Sleep in the Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. And Paolini might be a last name that you remember because it might be a book that inspired your love for reading, being Eragon. For me, I remember owning Eragon, but I can tell you that I don't remember reading it. So when I saw that Paolini was putting out a sci-fi book with a freaking beautiful looking cover, I was like, I would love to own a copy of that and maybe look at it, But you know what? I should also read it, which is what I did. This is also a pretty dang big book to read for my first, physical read, but I just got through this 56-hour book right here in terms of The Way of Kings on audio. So I said, you know what? I can do it. I can read this book. I can do it, right? So I did, and I had a blast reading through this. I think the cover did a fantastic job kind of representing what to expect within the series as well, or within the book, in terms of having you following this one main character being Kira, who is basically lost in a mix of turmoil and just chaos that all sparks from this one incident that happens very early on within the story. And you just get a mix of emotions because you are right there with her, going through all these crazy things. And it's just very expansive because the universe is huge within the series, with humans, spreading not too far, but pretty far out into the galaxy. And there might be, little traces of alien artifacts that we're not really sure what they represent, but it is expanded upon in this story. So I already knew that I love sci-fi because of movies, right? But this is a book that really helped solidify my love for reading sci-fi as well. And then from there, I picked up so many sci-fi books after that. So I really, really enjoyed To Sleep in the Sea of Stars. And I do recommend it if you've not read it just yet, because it's technical, it's action-packed, and it has a character you can sympathize for and see grow literally over time. And there we have it. Those are my 5 books that help solidify my love for reading. And I might show a picture of it right now in terms of my beginning bookshelf and to where I am today. So for you, what was the book that sparked your love for reading fantasy? Was it Wheel of Time? Was it Game of Thrones? Let me know down below. And for sticking around this long, you've earned 1 XP token, and if you're already a subscriber, you get an extra XP token, so here you go. Thanks again, have a good one, keep reading.